Picture a dinner table. Two people who once loved each other deeply now sit in careful silence, each scrolling through their phones. They are together, officially, legally, emotionally committed, and yet they have never been more alone. Now, picture a single person, walking home in the evening, keys in hand, no one waiting, no one needing, and in that walk, in that singular breath of solitude, a strange, undeniable peace. One of these people is lonely. One of these people is free. And today, I want to show you how to tell the difference. But before we begin, if this kind of reflection speaks to you, if you're someone who thinks deeply about life, about meaning, about the questions most people are too busy to ask, then please take a moment. Subscribe to this channel. Leave a like on this video. And when we are done, share your thoughts in the comments below. Not because I need your validation, but because your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear tomorrow. Now, let us begin. You have been shamed for being single. Or perhaps worse, you have shamed yourself. You have been told, subtly and loudly, that something is wrong with you, that you are too picky, too damaged, too afraid, that if you were truly whole, truly healed, truly spiritually awake, you would want a partner. And so you have tried. You have swiped. You have compromised. You have folded yourself into shapes that do not fit, hoping that someone would choose you, and that in being chosen, you would finally feel complete. But instead, you felt smaller, more confused, more lost in someone else's needs than you ever were in your own solitude. Let me tell you what is happening here. The world has confused partnership with wholeness. It has told you that being alone is a problem to be solved, a gap to be filled, a failure to be corrected. But being alone and being whole are not opposites. In fact, for some people, for spiritually awake people, they are the same thing. Here is the myth that you have been fed since you were old enough to understand fairy tales. If you are spiritually evolved, you will want a deep, conscious partnership. You will find your other half. You will merge with someone who sees you, who completes you, who makes you better. But here is the truth I will show you today, and I ask you to let it land in your chest, in your bones, in the part of you that has been quietly resisting this narrative for years. Some of the most spiritually evolved people on earth have chosen solitude, not as a compromise, but as a calling. They have looked at the cost of merging their life with another's, and they have said, with full awareness, with full love in their hearts, no, I choose me. And that is not selfish. That is sacred. Let me tell you a story, and I want you to sit with it as if it were your own. There is a woman in her 40s. She has been married twice. She has done the therapy. She has read the books. She has gone to the retreats. She has done all the spiritual work she was told to do. And one day, sitting alone in her apartment after a date that went perfectly fine, not bad, just fine, she realizes something that changes everything. She does not want a partner. Not because she is afraid, not because she is wounded, but because she has built a life with herself that is so rich, so textured, so profoundly satisfying, that inviting someone else in would feel like dilution. She tells her therapist this, expecting judgment. Instead, the therapist smiles and says, "Congratulations, you have become whole." Now, let me ask you something, and I need you to answer this honestly in the privacy of your own mind. If being in a relationship did not make you more valuable, more complete, more spiritually advanced, would you still want one? Strip away the pressure, the cultural script, the fear of being alone at 70, the quiet terror of being the only single person at the family gathering. If partnership were neutral, just a choice, not a should, what would you choose? Because your answer will reveal whether you are seeking love or seeking permission to be yourself. You see, the spiritually awake have done something most people never do. They have asked themselves this question, and they have listened to the answer. And what they have discovered is this, that you cannot give yourself away and keep yourself at the same time. That wholeness is not something you find in another person. It is something you protect within yourself. Let me explain what I mean by this, because I think it is the most important thing I will say today. When you enter a relationship, you do not just share your space, your time, your routines. You share your identity. You begin to see yourself through another person's eyes. You adjust. You accommodate. You begin to ask, not what do I want, but what do we want? And for many people, this is beautiful. This is love. This is connection. But for some people, this is erasure. Because in the merging, they lose track of where they end and the other person begins. They lose the thread of their own desires, their own thoughts, their own singular, irreplaceable selfhood. And here's what no one tells you. This is not always trauma. This is not always codependency. Sometimes, this is just the nature of intimacy. Intimacy requires porousness. It requires letting someone in. And for some souls, the cost of that porousness is too high. Not because they are afraid of love, but because they love themselves too much to dissolve. Think about it this way. Imagine you are a scientist. You have spent years, decades, even cultivating a very specific ecosystem in a glass container. You have balanced the moisture, the light, the nutrients. You have watched it grow. You have tended to it. And then someone says to you, you should add another plant to that container. It will make it more beautiful, more complete. But you look at your ecosystem and you know that adding another element will disrupt the balance. It might thrive. It might not. But it will no longer be the thing you so carefully built. And so you say, no, thank you. I am happy with what I have grown here. Is that fear? Or is that wisdom? The spiritually awake have learned to distinguish between loneliness and solitude. And this is critical. Loneliness is a feeling of lack. It is the sense that something is missing, that you are not enough on your own, that life is incomplete without a witness, a partner, a second heartbeat in the room. But solitude is different. Solitude is a choice. It is the active cultivation of your own company. It is the recognition that you are not only enough, you are abundant. That the relationship you have with yourself is so rich, so nourishing, that it does not require another person to validate it. And here is the part that will make some people uncomfortable, but I must say it. Many people are in relationships not because they have found their other half, but because they cannot bear to be alone with themselves. They cannot sit in silence without reaching for distraction. They cannot face their own thoughts without another voice to drown them out. And so they partner. They merge. They build a life with someone else, not out of love, but out of avoidance. But the spiritually awake, they have done the hardest work there is. They have learned to sit with themselves, to ask themselves the hard questions, to comfort their own fears, to celebrate their own victories in the quiet. And when you meet them, you feel it. A completeness that requires no mirror. A peace that needs no permission. Now, let me be very clear about something, because I do not want this to be misunderstood. I am not saying that relationships are bad. I am not saying that partnership is a trap. I am not saying that everyone who is in a relationship is avoiding themselves. Not at all. What I am saying is this. For some people, staying single is not a problem to be solved. It is a spiritual practice. It is the intentional choice to remain whole, undiluted, unmerged. And that choice deserves respect. It deserves recognition. It deserves to be seen not as a failure, but as a form of mastery. Because here is the truth. It is easy to lose yourself in another person. It is easy to make their needs your purpose, their happiness your responsibility, their life the organizing principle of your days. What is hard, what is almost impossibly hard, is to stay with yourself, to refuse the seduction of merger, to say, I am complete as I am, and I will not subtract myself to make room for someone else. Let me give you another example, one that might touch you more directly. Imagine you are an artist, not a famous one, just someone who paints or writes or makes music in the margins of your life. And you know that your art requires solitude, not just physical solitude, but mental solitude, a quietness of mind, a stillness that cannot exist when someone else's needs are ringing in your ears. You know that if you enter a relationship, your art will change. Maybe it will become richer. Maybe it will become shallower, but it will no longer be entirely yours. And you have to decide, is that a trade you are willing to make? For some people, the answer is yes. For others, the answer is no. And neither answer is wrong. But the world only celebrates the yes. The world only applauds the people who choose partnership, who choose compromise, who choose to fit their wild, singular soul into the shape of a couple. And the people who say no, they are told they are running. They're told they are afraid. They are told they will regret it. But what if they will not? What if they are living the most authentic version of their life precisely because they are living it alone? I want you to think about something with me. When was the last time you felt completely, undeniably yourself? Not performing, not adjusting, not code switching, not managing someone else's emotions or needs. When was the last time you felt the full, uncensored version of who you are? For many people, that moment happens alone. In the car, in the shower, on a walk at dawn when no one else is awake. And if that is true for you, if your most authentic self emerges only in solitude, then why would you ever choose to live any other way? The spiritually awake understand this. They understand that authenticity is not something you perform for another person. It is something you inhabit when no one is watching. And they have made the decision to live in that space permanently. Not as a waiting room, not as a temporary station before the real life begins, but as the real life itself. Now I know what some of you are thinking. You are thinking, but what about companionship? What about intimacy? What about growing old with someone? And these are fair questions. They are important questions. But let me ask you this. Do you really believe that the only way to experience companionship is through a romantic partnership? Do you really believe that intimacy can only exist between two people who share a bed, a home, a last name? Because if you do, then you have bought into a very narrow definition of connection. And I would invite you to expand it. You can have deep, profound intimacy with friends, with creative collaborators, with your own inner self. You can grow old surrounded by a community of people who love you not because they are bound to you by vows, but because they choose you again and again. And that, my friend, is a kind of love that does not require you to split yourself in half to receive it. The spiritually awake have also learned something else, and this is perhaps the most radical part of all. They have learned that they do not owe anyone their companionship. They do not owe the world a partner. They do not owe their parents grandchildren. They do not owe society a tidy narrative that fits into the boxes of marriage, family, happily ever after. They owe themselves one thing and one thing only, the truth. And if the truth is that they are happiest alone, then that is not a failure. That is a triumph. Let me paint you one final picture, and then I will bring us home. Imagine two lives. In the first life, a person spends their 20s, their 30s, their 40s searching, swiping, dating, hoping, trying to find the one who will complete them. They have a few relationships, some good, some bad. They compromise, they adjust, they make it work, or they do not. And along the way, they lose little pieces of themselves. Not dramatically, just quietly. A hobby they gave up because their partner was not interested. A dream they deferred because it did not fit into the shared plan. A part of their personality they softened because it was too much, too loud, too inconvenient. And one day, in their 50s, they look in the mirror and they do not recognize the person looking back. Not because they are old, but because they are not themselves anymore. Now imagine the second life. A person spends their 20s, their 30s, their 40s alone. By choice. Not because they could not find love, but because they chose themselves instead. They wake up when they want. They eat what they want. They travel where they want. They build a career, a creative practice, a spiritual life that is entirely their own. They have deep friendships. They have moments of loneliness. But they also have something most people never experience, an unbroken relationship with their own soul. And one day, in their 50s, they look in the mirror and they smile. Not because they are proud of what they have achieved, though they might be, but because they know, without question, who they are. Which of these lives is more spiritually awake? Which of these lives is more whole? I think you know the answer. And I think if you are here, if you have listened this far, it is because some part of you has always known the answer. You have always known that you are complete, that you do not need another person to validate your existence, that your life, singular and solitary as it may be, is not less than. It is not lacking. It is not a rough draft waiting to be revised. It is the final version, and it is enough. So let me leave you with this truth, and I ask you to repeat it whenever the world makes you feel less than for being alone. I am not incomplete because I am single. I am complete because I have chosen myself. You are not waiting. You are not broken. You're not missing your other half. You are whole, and your solitude is not a void. It is a sanctuary. The spiritually awake are not staying single because they are broken, afraid, or unable to love. They're staying single because they have learned something most people never do, that you cannot give yourself away and keep yourself at the same time. That wholeness is not something you find in another person. It is something you protect within yourself. They have chosen the most radical path available in a culture obsessed with pairing off. They have chosen self-possession. They have chosen to be the author, the lover, the witness of their own life. And in doing so, they have not closed the door to connection. They have simply refused to build their identity around it. If this stirred something in you, if it gave you permission you did not know you needed, or clarity you've been searching for in all the wrong places, then I ask you to do something small. Leave a word below. Just one word. The feeling this video left you with. Not for me. For the person who will come here tomorrow, wondering if they're the only one who feels this way. And if you want to continue asking the questions no one else is asking, to think in a space that does not demand you shrink or perform or pair off to be worthy, then stay. Subscribe. Walk with me. Not because you need me, but because you deserve a place where being whole and being alone are allowed to be the same thing.